The New York Giants have hired John Harbaugh to be their next head coach. And unfortunately for Giants fans, I believe the Giants organization is making a huge mistake with this move. Now, before you dislike this video or rush to the comments to tell me how big of an idiot I am, please hear me out as I explain why I don't think this is going to be the best move for the future of the New York Giants. So, the first thing we need to talk about is John Harbaugh's age. He is currently 63 years old, and why this is important is that the Giants are bucking a huge league wide trend that we have seen develop over the NFL over the last handful of years. So, over the last about 7 seasons, we've seen 47 different head coaches be hired in the NFL. 34 of these 47, or about 72%, were under the age of 50. 19 of these 47 were under the age of 40. That's about 40%. So the NFL is clearly targeting young, expansive minds to take over these franchises for the long haul. Obviously, this has been very much inspired by the successes of Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay in LA and San Francisco. And why I think this is a big deal for John Harbaugh being so much older, if you look at the last 12 head coaches not named John Harbaugh to be hired that were over the age of 50, 6 of the 12, or 50%, were fired within 3 seasons. And of the 6 still active head coaches, 4 out of the 6 had losing records and missed the playoffs entirely this season. Now, I'm not naive enough to just think that because a coach is younger, he's automatically going to be more successful. But the NFL is clearly telling us what it values in the NFL coaching market. It's choosing innovation and excitement over the traditional old guard. And that's where I think this Giants hire is already starting to look outdated. The next issue with this hire is John Harbaugh is being hired mainly to come in and boost the culture as opposed to be a schematic genius on either side of the ball. He's almost like a CEO of a company, if you will, where he's kind of focusing on the whole large picture. But the reason why that's flawed is because we've seen coaches who can still bring a strong culture and develop a strong culture while also bringing a schematic edge to the table, unlike Harbaugh, what he's not able to do. Having a great scheme and a strong culture, they don't have to be mutually exclusive. I mean, this season alone, look at Liam Cohen, Ben Johnson, and Mike Vrabel. All three of them stepped into new situations, set the tone immediately, and made the playoffs in their first year. They didn't just change the vibe, they brought legit answers in their schematic edges. And the issue with the CEO approach is also when you're not controlling the offense or controlling the defense, you're really only as good as your coordinators. So that means your season is going to go as your coordinators go. If you hire a great coordinator, he's going to be hired somewhere else, and then you're going to have to go find a new replacement. If he happens to be bad, well, then you're stuck with a poor offensive or defensive coordinator. And if you're constantly having to replace your coordinators, your play calling, game planning, and sometimes even your entire schematic structure can change. And this cycle of constantly replacing coordinators is going to slow down player development, it's going to create inconsistency, and it's going to force teams to restart progress instead of building on it. And as I mentioned earlier, Ben Johnson and Liam Cohen are both great examples of this. They were both hired last season because they were great offensive minds and great play callers for their respective teams. Now we've seen Ben Johnson and Liam Cohen both won their divisions, while their previous teams, the Detroit Lions and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, missed the playoffs entirely. And Ben Johnson and Liam Cohen aren't even the only example from this season. Nick Sirianni and the Eagles thrived when Kellen Moore was their offensive coordinator and player caller, so much that they even won a Super Bowl with him. However, after Kellen Moore was hired to be the head coach for the Saints, this offense heavily regressed under Kevin Patullo, and Nick Sirianni didn't have the answers to right the ship. And now here we are a year later, and the Eagles are already replacing Patullo, and Sirianni is on the hot seat. Another great example from it this season is Pete Carroll. He was hired as the Raiders to establish a new culture and be the CEO of this organization. But he fired his offensive coordinator after only 11 games and then was fired himself after securing the Raiders the first overall pick with a 3-14 record. So not only have we seen this with other coaches just this season, but we don't even have to go very far back to see this exact same trend be proven true with John Harbaugh. 2 years ago, the Baltimore Ravens lost Mike McDonald, who was then hired to be the Seahawks head coach. Since then, the Seahawks have now won the 1 seed and are 1 game away from the Super Bowl and are current Super Bowl favorites. Meanwhile, the Ravens have moved on from Harbaugh and are trying to replace him this season. And that's just the issue with the CEO style coach. To work long term, you either are going to need coordinators who aren't going to be poached, which typically means you're looking for failed, head coaches. Otherwise, you're going to have to take a shot on unproven candidates such as Kevin Patullo, and we see how that worked out. Or you're going to be constantly replacing who your coordinators are. Like the Buccaneers, for example, are going to be on their fifth offensive coordinator in as many seasons. Typically, if you have to go through one of these three options, you are not going to have sustained success. Now, I will say on a positive note, John Harbaugh does bring credibility, experience, and the professionalism to handle the New York media. And so he may come in and at least somewhat stabilize the Giants for a season or two. But ultimately, I just think the long term upside is capped, just like we saw in Baltimore. He can build a competitive and respectable team, but just like we saw, they were unable to break through that glass ceiling and actually win a Super Bowl or even get to a Super Bowl. So, with all of that being said, that's my take on John Harbaugh and why I don't think he's going to be a good hire. I think, best case scenario, you get a couple of good seasons, but then any talented play callers you get are going to go. Any strong defensive coordinators you get are going to go. And then, just like the Baltimore Ravens showed us a couple seasons ago, eventually you're going to have to be replacing John Harbaugh because his culture alone wasn't enough to get over these other strong cultures who also have strong schematic advantages over these other teams in the league. So that's my take. If you disagree with me, that's fine. Bookmark this video and we'll see how this is going to age in 3 seasons.